Shalom, giving honor and praise unto Yah, the creator and the maker of the heavens and the earth. We're going to continue on in this presentation entitled Issue of the Dispersion of Israel, Part 5. Okay? Isaiah 11 mentions that the Israelites, including Judah, were in the lands of Shinar, Elam, Patros, Egypt, Cush, Hamath, and the islands of the sea. The sea is the Mediterranean Sea. Isaiah lived as noted in a time when Assyria was waxed strong, and we see the Israelites are mentioned in places in what is now called in present-day Asia and Africa. The Israelites did not migrate to Europe as a whole group, as if they did as in other parts in Asia and Africa. What happened to the Israelites who scattered to African places? I mention that because this is the crux of the chart matter, as well as in other discussions. They migrated to other parts according to scholars, as in a book noted from earlier called Babylon and Timbuktu. One prophecy that the Israelites today use, which I know and understand of, is Deuteronomy 28 verse 68, which says in part, "And the Lord shall send you back into Egypt in ships." Egypt was the house of bondage. Egypt is not a Greek word for bondage, however. Exodus chapter 20 tells us from Egypt, the house of bondage. Egypt is mentioned 3 times in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, and it is all mentioned in a derogatory way. The Israelites were enslaved there, so thus it figures why. Now, to go on and to sit there and explain some of the fallacies and follies that some of the people of the Caucasian race state concerning Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is as follows. They say that it is speaking about the Roman army under Titus bringing Israelites to the literal land of Egypt. There are several questions that one has to ask. For centuries, the Israelites, and before that the Canaanites and the Egyptians, traveled back and forth between the land of Canaan and Egypt. No ships were needed. Another question is that if Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is talking about Titus bringing Israelites to Egypt in northeast Africa, what happened to the Israelites that were shipped to Egypt? What color were the Israelites that Titus shipped to Egypt in Africa? And where can that be found within history? Brothers and sisters, Deuteronomy 28 verse 68 is not talking about Titus bringing Israelites to Egypt in Africa. It is obvious that the Israelites who were in Egypt were from there in the time of the Persian era, 300 years before the Roman Emperor Titus went to Egypt on their own accord. All right? So that's why when you go into, you seeing what happened to a certain extent, what happened with the Elephantine issue that we spoke of before. In the Bible, we see in Hosea 8 verse 13 that Israel will surely go back into Egypt. This was a prophecy of captivity. Egypt in Africa, after the timing of Jeroboam, was not considered to be the worst place for the Israelites to go on the human plane. Thus, we see Jeroboam, Uriah, and others going to literal Egypt and northeast Africa on their own accord. So the prophet Hosea in Hosea chapter 8 verse 13 is speaking of the Matzorayim, the double distress, the double trouble, since ayim is a double plural word in Hebrew, and matzor in Hebrew means distress. So that's why Hebrew is important to a great extent. If you look at an outside source, such as the book Babylon and Timbuktu, the author spoke of the man Eldad the Danite. Eldad spoke of the tribes of Asher, Naphtali, Gad, and Dan going to the continent of Africa. Kohen Mikael, in his book Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference, spoke of one who said there are 1 million Jews residing from the Catabasmos to the border of Ethiopia. J.A. Rogers, in his book 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, stated on page 13 and on 33, West Africa has black Jews also. The children of Israel, Judah, and his brothers, after a course of time, the bulk of them migrated to African places and were eventually sold into slavery by the Hamitic or the indigenous African people to the Europeans. Eric Reynolds, in his book entitled Stand the Storm, stated that Africans sold foreigners obtained from distant lands. Africans did not sell Africans. They sold foreigners to merchants. In the book Black Cargoes by Mannix, it states that the captives on the ships would kill all the whites that the indigenous Africans would recapture and resell them to other Europeans. The above shows that it was Israelites who migrated to African places and were eventually, unfortunately, sold by indigenous Africans to the Europeans. The chart that is in circulation cannot be 100% accurate because they give a definitive pinpoint exact location of the tribes of Israel. The chart basically states that the people who were taken into captivity were from the tribes of Judah, Levi, and Benjamin in what we call the Atlantic slave trade. Such, however, is not the case. The slave ships went to areas from Connecticut to Brazil. If it was only the historical Southern Kingdom in the slave ships, how can the native Indians in Brazil be Asher and the people of the captivity taken from Western Africa be Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, be the North American black, the West Indians, and the Haitians when the slave ships went to places like Mexico as well? According to the chart that has been in circulation, the people in Mexico are the tribe of Issachar. But if Issachar is part of the Northern Kingdom, and it was the Southern Kingdom in the slave ships via the Atlantic slave trade, what happened to the black people that was shipped to Mexico? What tribe would they belong to according to the same chart in circulation is the question. The Assyrians did not ship Israelites to the Western Hemisphere. Isaiah, the prophet, states in Isaiah chapter 9, the Most High has sent a word against Jacob and it lighted upon Israel. The Most High spoke to Israel going into captivity. Jeremiah chapter 15 speaks of captivity, famine, sword, and death. Yes, there were natives who were and are Israelites. The chart, however, tries to give a definitive pinpoint location without regard to the historical, scriptural, and migrations of the people of Israel. Not all of the children of Israel were shipped to the Western Hemisphere, however. There are Israelites still in Western Africa. Not all Israel was taken to the Assyrian captivity. Also, there was some of Judah that was taken to Assyria as well. Not all of Judah was taken to Babylon. However, there were Israelites that were of the Northern Kingdom that were taken to Babylon. A controversial issue is whether or not many of the Hispanics of today are the Israelites. Some Israelites today say yes, and some Israelites today state no. According to history, it states, as in the case of Puerto Rico, that when the Europeans came to the land that is now called such, the Spaniards under the guy Ponce de Leon killed as many males as possible of the Taino people and raped the women. So in many cases, the children left are the children of the Spaniards. Are Mexicans today Israelites? Are Hispanics of today in general Israelites? Some Israelites today say yes and some say no. I would think, and I'm speaking from what I understand in history, that the brothers and sisters who are of our Hispanic people need to bring references, just as the black man, woman, and child did in the West, about our people being enslaved, called by words, and the lower and lower situation that Deuteronomy 28 speaks of. In the book of Genesis chapter 28 verses 1 through 3, we see that this is used by some Israelites to state that the Hispanics today cannot be of the house of Israel. I would state from what I know and understanding in history, there are Hispanics that are black and there are Hispanics that are not quote unquote black. However, their grandfather has black skin and an afro, and their aunt is what some may call a light-skinned black woman. The west side of Harlem, for instance, shows such an example. Israel, or the children of Israel, according to the prophet Jeremiah, is a speckled bird. Israelites teach that this is speaking of Israelites being multi-complexions. The author of Babylon and Timbuktu stated that a clean leper was welcomed back in the Israelite community in the ancient world. Would the mixing of black, blue, black Israelites and clean lepers who are also of the Israelite people produce different complexions of Israelites? According to the author of Babylon and Timbuktu, yes. Another controversial issue concerning the subject is the Jesus or the Yahshua issue among Israel. Many times, concerning the chart that is, the Israelites who promote the chart are correct. Pardon me. Many of the Israelites who promote the chart as correct state that it is the Kufi wearing, the Yiddish speaking, the non-New Testament Israelites who denounce the chart. But For those who are outside of the internet, YouTube, and Facebook world, know that there are Messianic Hebrews who do not believe in the chart as true. There are also Hispanics who hold to be in the house of Israel who are also deemed to be non-Messianic. So the idea of those who bash the chart is due to a non-issue of the Old and the New Testament belief is not accurate. Shalom, brothers and sisters, concerning this matter.